Chapter 1. The Crash. They said the first Mars expedition would be history's clean line. Leave Earth, touch red dust, come back with stories and samples. No one mentioned how quiet an alien planet could be when your ship is broken and the rest of your crew is a thin shard on the horizon. Jarvis lay on his back in the fractured sand, breathing like each lungful was borrowed. Above him, the Martian sky was a color that made no sense. Thin violet, washed in rust, streaked with faint auroras that pulsed like a dying heartbeat. The wreck of his scouting rocket lay half buried nearby, twisted metal bones jutting from the dunes. Comms dead, engine dead, pilot still ticking, he muttered, rolling to his knees. His suit's bioscreen flickered, a soft green smear across his wrist. Could be worse. In the distance, like a tooth breaking the horizon, the main ship sat squat and geometric against the sky, too far for his torn auxiliary rocket to glide back to, close enough that its silhouette taunted him. His trajectory had gone sideways during atmospheric entry, a sudden turbulence that the instruments hadn't predicted. The rocket coughed, yawed, and gravity did the rest. He dug into the emergency pack. Water, nutrient paste, oxygen cartridges, flare gun, field scanner, rad tablet, and one small pistol that felt ridiculous against a whole planet. Jarvis stood, dust sliding off his suit in hesitant streams. The landscape around him was a wasteland of baked plains and broken ridges. The sand not quite sand, more like ground glass mixed with powdered rust. Far off, a line of dark formations rose like a fossilized wave, jagged and unnatural. Right, he said to the empty air. Walk toward the ship, or sit here and wait to die. Democracy of one. I vote to walk. He turned toward the far glint of the expedition ship and began to move, each step kicking up a faint cloud that hung in the thin air longer than it should. The wind was a low, almost electronic whine, slipping around rocks like static. Mars didn't feel dead. It felt like something that had once been alive and still remembered how. After an hour, the first sign that Mars might remember him too appeared. The ground sloped into a shallow basin where the dust gave way to a darker material, almost metallic. Hexagonal plates fused into a wide, cracking mosaic stretched to the basin's center. It was like standing on an exposed vertebra of the planet. Not in the survey maps, Jarvis muttered, scanning. The field scanner hummed, lights flickering in confusion. The material beneath him registered as unknown alloy, interlaced with silicate structures and organic traces. A biomechanical floor. He stepped carefully, listening. There was a faint vibration under his boots, like machinery buried deep, breathing in slow, tectonic cycles. The hairs on his neck rose. Nope, he decided. We're not making friends with that today. He skirted the basin's center, pushing back toward the sand and the thin line of the ship on the horizon. He made maybe 10 steps before the landscape itself seemed to shudder. In the distance, beyond a rise of jagged rock, something howled. The sound wasn't animal. It was a layered chord. Metal grinding, air torn, static flaring. And underneath it all, a note that felt like it was being played on his bones. Jarvis froze. The howl faded, swallowed by the thin Martian air. leaving only the faint ring in his teeth. "Okay," he whispered. "So I'm not alone." He adjusted the strap on his pack, gripped the pistol a little tighter, and kept walking. Chapter 2. The Dunes. The second day, the landscape shifted from broken plains to a wilderness of low ridges and troughs, like a frozen sea that had been smashed and left to rust. Jarvis rationed his oxygen and water, keeping his breathing slow, counting steps to keep from thinking too hard. Sometimes he thought he saw movement at the edge of his vision, a flicker on a ridge, a shadow sliding behind a rock. But each time he turned, there was nothing but dust and the ghostly shimmer of the atmosphere. By the afternoon, fatigue gnawed at his thoughts. He'd stopped checking the ship's silhouette. It dipped and rose between ridges, sometimes vanishing entirely. He kept going purely by direction and stubbornness, letting instinct carry him forward. That was when he saw it. At first he thought it was a statue, a tall, jointed shape standing half hidden in a swale of dust. As he approached, details resolved. Its body was a slender, triple-jointed framework of bone-white segments and dark, flexible tendons. Its head was an elongated ovoid, ridged and smooth, with a single, large eye set in the center, like a polished black orb. It was standing perfectly still, one three-toed foot braced on a rock, the other sunk in the sand. Around its midsection, a band of glistening plates rippled faintly, like breathing through armor. Then the eye blinked. Jarvis stopped so sharply he almost fell. The creature turned its head toward him with unnatural fluidity, black eye focusing. There was a long, silent beat, where human and Martian measured each other across a few meters of alien soil. "Ah," Jarvis said quietly. "Hello." The creature stepped off the rock, moving with an elastic, springing gait, as if every joint were a combination of piston and tendon. It didn't come directly at him, more of a cautious arc, circling, eye never leaving his face. Jarvis slowly raised his hands, palm out. "I'm friendly," he said, knowing words were useless, but tone maybe wasn't. "Mostly. Don't make me prove otherwise." The alien paused. One of its three-fingered hands lifted, mirroring his gesture, the digits splaying. Then it let out a sound, high and fluting, like glass chimes being played in a high wind. The suit's mic recorded it. Jarvis's brain just filed it under, not hostile yet. He touched his chest. "Jarvis," then pointed, not quite at it, but near. "You?" The alien cocked its head. A series of tonal notes flowed from its mouth, if it even had a mouth, rising and falling with odd rhythm. Something about the pattern tickled his ear, like it wanted to be language. "Right," Jarvis said. "We're doing this." He tried again, slower. "Jar-vis." He tapped his chest with each syllable. The alien made a soft clicking sound. Then, unexpectedly, it tapped its own chest plate with one hand and said, in a rough, distorted mimicry, "Tweel." Jarvis stared. The sound wasn't perfect, but the echo of his cadence was unmistakable. "Tweel," he repeated, tasting the shape of it. The alien's eye brightened, a faint inner glow awakening. It nodded, a strange, looping bob of the head. "Tweel." "Okay, Tweel," Jarvis said. "Looks like we're partners for a bit." He pointed toward the faint glint of the main ship on the horizon, then mimed walking, exaggerating his steps. "I go there." Tweel looked to where Jarvis pointed. The Martian's eye narrowed, focusing on the distant shape. It made a few soft, low notes. Thought sounds, Jarvis decided, then turned back to him. Slowly, Tweel extended an arm, its hand opening palm up in a gesture so eerily human, Jarvis felt a shiver. Then it pointed somewhere else, away from the ship, toward a line of jagged structures rising like broken teeth from the plain. The direction carried a weight, an intent. "You want me to go that way?" Jarvis asked. Tweel made a quick, spiraling motion with its hand, then touched its chest again. The meaning was muddy, but the urgency in its posture wasn't. Something waited out there. "Can't," Jarvis said. "I've got to get back to my people." He pointed once more toward the ship. Home. Tweel watched him for a long, silent moment. Then, with a sinuous grace, it stepped forward, came to stand beside him, and pointed the same way, toward the ship. Then it looked at Jarvis, as if to say, "Fine, we go together." Jarvis exhaled slowly. "Well, hell," he said. "Guess I just made first contact and got a guide in one day." They walked. They said the first Mars expedition would be history's clean line. Leave Earth, touch red dust, come back with stories and samples. No one mentioned how quiet an alien planet could be when your ship is broken and the rest of your crew is a thin shard on the horizon. Jarvis lay on his back in the fractured sand, breathing like each lungful was borrowed. Above him, the Martian sky was a color that made no sense. Thin violet washed in rust, streaked with faint auroras that paused like a dying heartbeat. The wreck of his scouting rocket lay half. Chapter 3. Walking with Tweel. Traveling with Tweel was like sharing a road with a dream that had decided to wear bones. The Martian moved in bounds, long, elastic leaps that ate distance, then short, precise steps when crossing dangerous ground. Its limbs weren't just for walking. Sometimes Tweel would tuck legs and arms inward and roll, a perfect, living hoop, spinning down dunes with an almost playful grace. Communication was complicated. Tweel picked up human words like scavenged tools, turning them over, sometimes using them in ways that almost made sense. Jarvis talked to fill the silence, explaining tools, the ship, Earth, the concept of home. Tweel listened with that unblinking black eye, and occasionally responded with strings of notes and chimes, accompanied by gestures. Patterns emerged, fragments of meaning about directions, danger, and things under the ground. Once, when Jarvis pointed at the biomechanical basin they skirted and said, "Bad," Tweel froze, made a sharp, cutting gesture, then produced a sound that made the back of Jarvis's skull crawl. A grinding hiss, layered with a low vibration that felt like the echo of that first howl he'd heard. The machine flesh under the planet's crust was not just terrain. It was something more, something Tweel feared or respected enough to warn him away from. They rested briefly under a jagged outcrop that cast scant shade. Jarvis chewed nutrient paste and watched Tweel with sideways glances. The Martian didn't eat, at least not anything he could recognize as food. At one point, it knelt beside the rock, pressed its hand flat to the surface, and remained motionless. After a minute, the plates on its midsection pulsed faintly, like it was absorbing resonance? Photosynthesis by rock, Jarvis murmured. Sure, why not? He pointed at Tweel's midsection. You feed? Tweel turned, followed his gesture, then pressed its own hand there. Feed, it echoed carefully. It tapped the rock again and made a soft, low note. Everything on Mars seemed wired into something else. Rock feeding alien. Alien wary of the living metal under the crust. The whole planet a nervous system. Dead in places, twitching in others. They moved on, following a shallow valley. As the light thinned, the sky darkened into a bruised indigo, and the first stars appeared. Sharp, alien pinpricks in a sky with no familiar constellations. A cold wind slid through the valley like a metal blade. Jarvis's suit chimed. Oxygen at the margin. He checked the coordinates, squinted at the distant horizon. The ship was closer now. He could make out its sharper lines, a geometry imposed on chaos. Relief flickered through him, muddied by exhaustion and the crawling sense of being watched. They weren't alone in the valley. Chapter 4. Things that should not move. It began as a shimmer in the dust ahead. Heat mirage, he thought. Then the mirage moved against the wind. Tweel stopped dead, arm snapping out to bar Jarvis's path. The Martian's plates tightened, limbs tensing for either flight or fight. The shimmer thickened, drawing up from the sand like smoke reversing gravity. It coalesced into a hunched shape that was more suggestion than body, angles resolving and dissolving, as if reality couldn't quite agree where it should be. Then eyes opened along its surface. Too many eyes. They were not arranged in any pattern Jarvis's brain wanted to parse. Clusters here, rows there, some overlapping, some nested. Each eye was a different color, a different pupil shape, and all of them turned toward him. The thing stepped forward. Its legs were made of nothing, and yet displaced dust with each motion. Parts of it appeared transparent, Martian landscape visible through its limbs, edges flickering like a bad transmission. Here and there, metal glinted, struts and bands, and half-embedded shards of something like bone. Voidborn, Jarvis whispered without knowing why. The word didn't come from his training or his memory. It was simply right. The creature made a sound. No, a combination of sounds played across multiple frequencies. It was like hearing static tuned through a dozen stations at once, voices and tones layered and reversed. Behind it all, Jarvis caught a pulse, like the beats he'd felt under the hexagonal alloy basin. This thing was connected to the machine flesh under the planet's skin. Tweel stepped forward, standing between Jarvis and the Voidborn entity. Its limbs spread, making itself wider. It sang. There was no better term for it. Clear, rising tones in a pattern that made Jarvis think of mathematics, spirals, and star maps. The Voidborn halted. Its limbs flexed, reality around them bending slightly, like the air was thicker in its presence. Multiple eyes blinked in unsynchronized rhythm. Tweel's song shifted, became sharper, more staccato. Jarvis could feel harmonics scraping his nerves, unsheathing some instinctive fear of being unmade. The Voidborn creature withdrew a step. Dust swirled around its feet, and for a moment, Jarvis saw the hexagonal alloy pattern beneath the sand. A glimpse of buried structure, like the planet's skeleton bared for an instant. Then the thing folded. Limbs sank into its own body, eyes closing, the whole mass collapsing into a low, pulsing node the size of a boulder. That too sank, grains of sand swallowing it entirely. Silence poured back into the valley. Jarvis released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. You. chased it off. Tweel turned, eye dimming slowly. It made a low, tired series of notes and touched the ground where the thing had gone under, then its own chest, then the sky. They're part of the planet, Jarvis guessed. You, the machine under the ground, that thing, all tied together. Tweel didn't confirm or deny. Instead, the Martian pointed again toward the distant ship, then made a small, circular motion over its midsection that Jarvis had come to associate with urgency, cycles, time running down. Oxygen, Jarvis said. Yeah, clock's ticking. They hurried. Chapter 5. The Crystal City. By the next day, Jarvis's world had narrowed to his own breathing and the flickering arc of the ship on the horizon. Tweel stayed with him, never ranging far, its long leaps tempered to match the pace of a stumbling human in a heavy suit. The land changed again, ridges falling away into a shallow basin filled with strange formations, tall, slender towers that looked grown rather than built. They rose from the dust like a forest of glass vertebrae, some straight, some twisted in slow spirals, each one faceted with complex geometric patterns. As they drew closer, Jarvis realized they weren't just crystal. Embedded within each structure were veins of metal and dark organic lines, like circuits knitted through bone. "City," he said under his breath, awe pushing aside fatigue. Tweel made a soft, hesitant sound. Its body language shifted, wariness and reverence both. They entered between the towers. The air here felt different, charged. Every step set off a faint resonance in the structures, a tiny ringing like distant chimes. The field scanner blinked uselessly. Readings jittered wildly between mineral, metal, and unknown bioform. At the center of the basin lay a larger formation, half collapsed, its upper segments broken off and scattered like shattered teeth. This one was heavily, visibly fused with machinery. Girders of dark alloy wrapped around crystal growth, nodes of pulsing light embedded where stone met metal. A ruin, Jarvis thought. A city grown by something that understood both geology and circuitry. Movement caught his eye. At the base of the central structure, shapes huddled in the shadow. At first, he took them for debris. Barrels tipped on their sides, clustered in irregular piles. Then one of them uncoiled. The creature that emerged was roughly cylindrical, its body ringed with flexible segments like a stack of vertebrae wrapped in chitin. Multiple short, jointed limbs protruded from its sides, each ending in a manipulatory cluster. The front end split open like an iris, revealing a ring of glistening cilia that rippled as if tasting the air. It rolled forward with eerie grace, then unfolded enough limbs to stand. Others followed, half a dozen at least, all turning their front ends toward Jarvis and Tweel. Jarvis instinctively reached for his pistol. Tweel made a sharp sound and tapped his arm, as if to say, "Wait." One of the barrel creatures advanced, limbs splayed in a non-threatening spread. It touched one of the low crystal formations beside it with a delicate limb. The crystal flared, just for a moment, with inner light, patterns racing along its facets. The barrel creature vibrated, like it was reacting to a signal. Then it turned toward Jarvis and made a stuttering, crackling noise that sounded like someone trying to speak through a broken speaker. Stranger, the sound resolved in his headset, filtered automatically into recognizable phonemes by the suit's translation routines. It wasn't perfect, huge chunks lost, but the intent came through. They had been listening, learning. Jarvis didn't speak. He glanced at Tweel. Tweel stepped forward, produced a sequence of musical notes, short, rising, falling, complex. One of the barrel creatures rolled closer to the crystal and answered by touching it again. Light flowed. Tone changed. The city itself seemed to be listening. It dawned on Jarvis then. The crystal formations were not just architecture. They were storage, memory. The barrel creatures, custodians of a dead or sleeping network, using the remaining charge to think, to speak. He felt like an ape in a cathedral built by ghosts and machines. "We're just passing through," he said quietly inside his helmet, knowing they couldn't understand the words, but speaking anyway. "I just want to get home." As if in response, one of the crystal towers ahead flickered, shedding faint luminescence in a directional path, an illuminated trail leading toward the basin's rim, toward where the ship sat beyond the horizon. Tweel watched the glow, then looked back at Jarvis. The Martian's eye held something like sorrow. "Your people?" Jarvis asked. "This place, yours?" Tweel made a low tone that wavered between yes and no. It touched one of the crystal structures gently, hand lingering on the damaged facets, then pointed once more toward the glowing path. The city's memory wanted him gone, or safe, or simply moved out of the pattern. Either way, the message was clear. Go. They followed the light. Chapter 6. The Return. The last stretch was the worst. The ground climbed gradually, dunes sloping upward into a low ridge. Each step felt like dragging lead through syrup. Jarvis's oxygen warning had turned from an occasional chime into a steady, soft alarm. Numbers ticked down relentless as a clock in a prison cell. He stumbled. Tweel caught his arm, surprisingly gentle for such a strange frame, and helped him back up. The Martian's eye dimmed and brightened in quiet rhythm, like a heartbeat. At the ridge's crest, they finally saw it clearly. The main expedition ship, a solid wedge of human engineering planted in the Martian dust. The comms mast glittered with solar panels, the hull scored by entry heat and sand abrasion, but it was whole, alive. The sight hit Jarvis harder than any impact. Home was not supposed to make a man cry, but his throat tightened all the same. "Almost there," he rasped. Figures were moving around the base of the ship now, tiny, ant-like astronauts. A vehicle detached and started toward him, wheels kicking up long, lazy plumes of dust. He turned to Tweel. "This is it," he said softly. "You got me home." Tweel studied the ship, its eye reflecting the sharp lines of human technology. It made a series of sounds, curious, almost amused. Jarvis wondered what they looked like to it. Crude, primitive, tiny, disconnected machines in a world that preferred to weave life and metal together. Jarvis pointed to his own chest. Jarvis, human, home. He pointed to the ship. Then, hesitating, he pointed back toward the way they'd come. The Crystal City, the biomechanical basins, the Voidborn thing in the dust. He tapped his helmet. "I remember." Tweel's hand lifted. For a second, Jarvis thought it might try to touch his faceplate, but it only tapped its own chest again. "Tweel," it said simply. Then it pointed to the ground, spreading its arms in a wide circle, encompassing everything: sand, stone, machine bone, sky. Home. The rover was close now. He could hear its electric whine through the thin air. Voices crackled in his ear, growing from static into words. Jarvis! Jarvis, is that you? Signal's weak. Your beacon just came up. He laughed, the sound wild and small in the helmet. Yeah, he said. It's me. I brought back a story. When he looked back, Tweel was already moving away, bounding in those long, easy strides, heading back toward the strange geometry of its world. It didn't look back. Wait, Jarvis said impulsively, taking a step after it. Tweel. The Martian paused at the edge of a dune, half silhouetted. It looked over its shoulder, that single black eye reflecting both the human ship and the alien horizon. Then, in a voice rough with borrowed sounds, it called back one last word. Friend. And then it was gone, slipping over the dune and into the Martian wilderness, where void-born things slept under alloy bones and crystal cities remembered the sound of songs. The rover reached him in a haze of dust and noise. Hands grabbed him, guided him into the cramped safety of the cabin. Questions hammered at him even before his helmet came off. What happened to your scout ship? How far did you get? What did you see out there? Jarvis closed his eyes for a moment, letting the stale, recycled air of the rover fill his lungs. When he opened them, the ship loomed closer, and Mars stretched behind him, silent, watching. I walked, he said finally. I walked a long way, and I met the neighbors. They laughed, thinking it a joke. He didn't correct them.